currently Earth.
It was December 23rd in the year 1620, 1 week after the Mayflower docked at Plymouth Harbor in present-day Massachusetts, that construction of the first permanent European settlement in New England began. On September 16th, the Mayflower departed Plymouth, England, bound for the New World with 102 passengers. The ship was headed for Virginia, where the colonists, half religious dissenters and half entrepreneurs, had been authorized to settle by the British Crown. In a difficult Atlantic crossing, the 90-foot Mayflower encountered rough seas and storms and was blown more than 500 miles off course. Along the way, the settlers formulated and signed the Mayflower Compact, an agreement that bound the signatories into a civil body politic. Because it established constitutional law and the rule of majority, the compact is regarded as an important precursor to American democracy. After a 66-day voyage, the ship landed on November 21st at the tip of Cape Cod, at what is now Provincetown, Massachusetts. After coming to anchor in Provincetown Harbor, a party of men under the command of Captain Miles Standish were sent out to explore the area and find a location suitable for settlement. While they were gone, Susanna White gave birth to a son, Peregrine, aboard the Mayflower. He was the first English child born in New England. In mid-December, the explorers went ashore at a location across Cape Cod Bay where they found cleared fields and plentiful running water, and they named the site Plymouth. The expedition returned to Provincetown, and on December 21st, the Mayflower came to anchor in Plymouth Harbor. 2 days later, the Pilgrims began working on dwellings that would shelter them through their difficult first winter in America. In the first year of settlement, half the colonists continued their eternity of disease. In 1621, the health and economic conditions of the colonists improved. In that autumn, Governor William Bradford invited neighboring Indians to Plymouth to celebrate the bounty of that year's harvest season. Plymouth soon secured treaties with most local Indian tribes, and the economy steadily grew, and more colonists were attracted to the settlement. By the mid-1640s, Plymouth's population numbered 3,000 people, but by then, the settlement had been overshadowed by the larger Massachusetts Bay Colony to the north, settled by Puritans in 1629. The term Pilgrim was not used to describe the Plymouth colonists until the early 19th century and was derived from a manuscript in which Governor Bradford spoke of the saints who traveled to the New World as pilgrims. In 1820, the orator Daniel Webster spoke of Pilgrim Fathers at a bicentennial celebration of Plymouth's founding, and thereafter the term entered common usage. On December 23rd in 1888, Dutch painter Vincent van Gogh, suffering from severe depression, cuts off the lower part of its left ear with a razor while staying in Arles, France. He later documented the event in a painting titled Self-Portrait with Bandaged Ear. Today, Van Gogh is regarded as an artistic genius, and his masterpieces sell for record-breaking prices. However, during his lifetime, he was a poster boy for tortured, starving artists and sold only one painting. Vincent Willem van Gogh was born on March 30th in 1853 in the Netherlands. He had a difficult, nervous personality and worked unsuccessfully at an art gallery and then as a preacher among poor miners in Belgium. In 1880, he decided to become an artist. His work from this period, the most famous of which is The Potato Eaters from 1885, is dark and somber and reflective of the experiences he had among peasants and impoverished miners. In 1886, Van Gogh moved to Paris where his younger brother Theo, with whom he was extremely close, lived. Theo, an art dealer, supported his brother financially and introduced him to a number of artists, including Paul Gauguin, Camille Pissarro, and Georges Seurat. Influenced by these and other painters, Van Gogh's own artistic style lightened up and he began using more color. In 1888, Van Gogh rented a house in Arles in the south of France where he hoped to found an artist colony and be less of a burden to his brother. In Arles, Van Gogh painted vivid scenes from the countryside, as well as still lifes, including his famous Sunflower series. Paul Gauguin came to stay with him in Arles, and the two men worked together for almost 2 months. However, tensions developed on December 23rd. In a fit of dementia, Van Gogh threatened his friend with a knife before turning it on himself and mutilating his earlobe. Afterward, he allegedly wrapped up the ear and gave it to a prostitute at a nearby brothel. Following that incident, Van Gogh was hospitalized in Arles and then checked himself into a mental institution in Saint Remy for a year. During his stay in Saint Remy, he fluctuated between periods of madness and intense creativity in which he produced some of his best and most well-known works, including Starry Night and Irises. In May of 1980, Van Gogh moved to Auvers-sur-Oise near Paris, where he continued to be plagued by despair and loneliness. On July 27th in 1890, he shot himself and continued his eternity 2 days later at the age of 37. On December 23rd in 1959, Chuck Berry is arrested in St. Louis, Missouri on charges relating to his transportation of a 14-year-old girl across state lines for allegedly immoral purposes. Never saw a man so changed is how the great Carl Perkins described the experience of touring England in 1964 alongside Chuck Berry. He had been an easygoing guy before, the kind of guy who'd jam in dressing rooms, sit and swap looks and jokes. But in England, he was cold, real distant and bitter. That quote was how Carl Perkins described Chuck Berry during their 1964 tour in England. The before, to which Perkins referred, was the 4-year period from 1956 to 1959, when Berry established his reputation as one of rock and roll's founding fathers, not only turning out such classic hits as Maybelline and Johnny B. Good, but also establishing the very template that nearly every rock and roll guitarist after him would follow. What had changed Chuck Berry, in Perkins' opinion, was partly the long, hard grind of years and years of one-night-only live performances. But as Perkins also said, quote, "I figure it was mostly jail," unquote. Between 1960 and 1963, the man who helped invent rock and roll spent 20 months in federal prison following his conviction on charges of violating the Mann Act. The Mann Act is a common name for a piece of federal legislation originally known as the United States White Slave Traffic Act of 1910. Though intended as a tool for cracking down on organized prostitution, the vague language of the Mann Act regarding the transportation of women for immoral purposes rendered its provisions broadly unenforceable. It has been selectively applied in various high-profile cases over time, however, most famously in Berry's and in that of heavyweight boxing great Jack Johnson. In Chuck Berry's case, the Mann Act charges stem from what Berry contended was his offer of legitimate employment in his St. Louis nightclub to a girl he had met in a bar in Juarez, Mexico. 3 weeks after being fired from Berry's nightclub, 14-year-old Janice Noreen Escalante took a different story to the St. Louis police, and Berry was arrested 2 days later, on this day in 1959. Berry's defense was not found credible by the all-male, all-white jury at his first trial, and he was convicted on March 11th in 1960 and sentenced to 5 years imprisonment and a $5,000 fine. Although he would have his conviction vacated and a new trial ordered by a federal appeals court in October of 1960 due to disparaging racial comments made by the judge in his original trial, Berry would be convicted again on retrial in March of 1961 and served the better part of the next 2 years in prison. Historic information divulged and documented on this audio file can be verified on the